acoustic treatment can feel very confusing and overwhelming. And I think there's all sorts of reasons for this. There's so many people talking about it online. There's so many different companies making so many different products. It's hard to know what they do, if they're good, if what situations you'd use them for, why you'd want this product over that product. It can be very overwhelming very quickly. So what I want to do in this video is walk through what I think the main 10 types of acoustic treatment that you should know about for your home studio are, and when you might want to use them, whether or not they're, quote, good or bad, and which ones you should lean towards over others and why. Let's discuss. Welcome back to the Home Studio Pro podcast. We're helping you create professional sounding music from your home studio. I'm your host, Colin Cross, and today we're talking about the 10 types of acoustic treatment that you need to know about for your home studio. And I'm going to put types in quotation marks because some of them are more about their placement or how you might move them around in the room for specific goals. You'll see what I mean as we get into it. But yeah, types is in quotation marks. You'll see. It'll make sense. Before we get into it, also, if you don't already have my Home Studio Pro checklist, be sure to grab it for free from the link in the description, or just go to thebandguide.com/Home Studio Pro checklist, all one word. This guide walks through a 4-step process to help you make a professional home studio that makes creating professional sounding music easy. Now, full disclosure, this guide is kind of living and breathing, if you will, as I am working out these lessons on the podcast and in my YouTube videos. As I'm fleshing out the best way to teach these things, I'm updating this guide. So it will update over time. If you're watching this in real time, you'll get the most updated version as soon as I'm ready with it. And if you're watching this after the fact, go and download it because it's probably already done. But just want to give you that little disclosure. But it's completely free from the link in the description below, or thebandguide.com/Home Studio Pro checklist. Grab it. It's really going to help you out, and it's free, so be sure to pick it up. Okay, let's go and get into the 10 types of acoustic treatment. Now, the basis that you need to know going into this discussion is that there's 2 kinds of acoustic treatment, broadly speaking. There is absorption, which is about slowing down or reducing the energy of the sound so the reflections don't get back into your microphone or into your ears if you're mixing. And then there's diffusion, and diffusion is about taking the sound and spreading it out so that, as opposed to something bouncing off the wall and coming straight back to the microphone or straight back to your ears when you're mixing, it's going to spread it out so that it has energy in the room, but it's not directional and negatively impacting the sound in the same way. It keeps a lively feel, but it spreads out the energy. True diffusion is diffused across the entire frequency spectrum. That's not necessarily possible in most home studios, just based on dimensions that both the diffusion would have to be, but also the physical space for the air to let that sound diffuse out of it. All that to be said, when I use the word diffusion here for this context, I'm not necessarily talking about true diffusion. I'm talking about diffusion-like products that are still successful in a home studio scenario. So if you're an acoustician, just know that there's a little bit of a caveat there. So, but broadly speaking, we're thinking about absorption or diffusion. And diffusion plays and should play a smaller role to some extent in most home studios, but we'll get into that when it comes up. So let's talk about acoustic treatment number 1, which is a form of absorption, and this is acoustic foam. Now, acoustic foam might be the first thing you think about when you think about acoustic treatment. These are those foam panels. They usually have some sort of designs cut into them. They're usually claimed to be 2 inches thick or so. And acoustic foam as a product could be a great form of absorption, could be great acoustic treatment in the studio. The problem comes into that companies cut these cool, quote, designs into them that make them thinner. If you think about a pyramid shape being cut into a 2-inch hunk of foam, the peaks are the only thing that are 2 inches. Everything else is less than 2 inches. And for your acoustic treatment in your home studio, you want everything to be at least 2 inches, if not 4 inches, 6 inches. And that has to do with the length of frequencies. Different frequencies have different lengths that they travel. So sub-frequencies are super long, and as you get up to high frequencies, they're very, very short. So thin panels do a pretty good job at trapping super high frequencies, but they do nothing for upper mid-range frequencies, mid-range frequencies, low mid frequencies, certainly not bass and sub-frequencies. So if you have a 2-inch acoustic foam panel that has a design, quote unquote, cut into it that is making it less than 2 inches at everywhere on that panel, most of that panel is doing very, very little, basically nothing for your home studio. Add in, if you buy it from a cheap Amazon seller, Temu seller, whoever, the density of that foam is probably not true acoustic foam, and it's not going to even stop the high frequencies very well. So if you want to get foam, if you have foam, I would definitely go with a name brand that at least you know you're getting true acoustic foam and not super, super thin product that's not actually dense enough to capture anything. But in general, I would say foam is not something that is the best use of your money for acoustic treatment in a home studio. So let's get into what is a better use for the home studio, and that's 2, 3, and 4. All three of these, 2, 3, and 4, are acoustic panels, and we'll break them down as individual types, if you will. Acoustic panels, hopefully you've seen them before. These are typically rectangular in shape. They're usually a little bit deeper, and they're functionally insulation in a wooden frame that is wrapped with fabric. They look very professional, and they sound really great. They actually have enough acoustic properties in most cases to get you true absorption from your reflections. Now, number 2 specifically is mid-high panels. These are panels that are 2 inches thick, so the insulation in them is 2 inches, and that is a good amount of insulation to get some of the mid-frequencies up into the high frequencies. I think it's the thinnest that you want your acoustic treatment to be in. Again, not just at the peaks like acoustic foam, but the entire panel should be 2 inches. So mid-high panels, good for getting into the mid-range. Number 3 is what's called broadband panels. This is when we're starting to get deeper panels, and these look the same as the other type of acoustic panels, they're just deeper. So broadband panels, usually about 4 inches deep, and now we're starting to get into the mid-range a decent amount. We're starting to actually capture all of the reflections. If you don't do this, if you don't capture all the reflections, if you don't get into the low mid-range, then you could very easily, when you're recording your acoustic guitar, recording your vocals, get a lot of buildup or kind of nulling out of specific frequencies. So you might get more muddiness in your recording, or you might get less of that warmth in your recording that you actually want. And once you've recorded it, that's captured in your recording, and you can't necessarily get it back or tame it in the same way as if you tame those reflections before you were recording. So you want broadband panels that are usually at least 3-4 inches deep, to really treat the acoustics when you're recording and mixing, because the same principles apply for the sound that's bouncing off your walls and getting back into your ears when you're mixing from speakers. So broadband panels, I think, are a sweet spot for home studios, because you're always balancing both the space, the cost, and the effectiveness when you're thinking about acoustic treatment. Broadband panels, in my opinion, live kind of in the sweet spot where they're usually not prohibitively expensive. A couple of good broadband panels is going to be way better than totally covering your room in thin acoustic foam. So a couple of good and intentionally placed, that's important to note. But broadband panels, I think, are the first that I would really recommend. I think mid-high panels can definitely be effective, and they can be more affordable, and they can take up less space in the room. So depending on your requirements, they might be the best use for you. But for most people, I'd say broadband panels. These are, again, those kind of rectangular. They could be square. The shape doesn't really matter, but they are usually square frames of insulation wrapped in fabric, and they usually are at least 3, if not 4 inches deep to be effective. Now, number 4 is another type of panel. So again, looks exactly the same. We're just getting deeper here. And here we're starting to get into the bass frequencies. These are called bass trap panels, and they're usually at least 5.5, 6 inches deep, can be deeper, can be 8 inches deep. These are panels that are deep enough to actually start capturing some of those low end frequencies and absorbing them, so they're reflecting around the room less, they're resonating in the room less, and we're getting less bass buildup in our room. If you haven't watched or listened to last week's episode where we kind of explained the goals and the science behind acoustic treatment and room acoustics, in there I explained that, broadly speaking, you can break out your acoustic treatment into bass and low end absorption and mid-range and up absorption. And mid-range and up is very directional, meaning that it really matters the placement of that panel. Whereas low-end treatment is not as directional. Low-end frequencies are so long that they move in a more omnidirectional way. So having bass trap panels anywhere in your studio can help you absorb some of those low frequencies. Now, before we talk about specific placements where they can be maximally effective, let's talk really quickly about how you can think about acoustic panels in general. And that's that you want to treat as much of the sound as you possibly can. And a bass trap panel is going to capture all of the high frequencies, all the mid frequencies, but also the deeper low end frequencies. If you only have panels that are only capturing the high end and the high mids, then what you get left with is a very dull sounding room that's very boomy, because all the low end is still resonating around the room and building up as much as possible, or as much as it would like to, if you will. So you want to treat with as deep panels as you can afford, again, in terms of your budget, in terms of your space, and in terms of your goals for recording. If you're only ever recording vocals, bass traps are great, but you'd probably be fine with broadband panels. But if you're recording things that have a lot of real low mids and low end to them. Even acoustic guitar falls into this category, but bass guitar, drums, things like that, electric guitar, low end needs to have those deeper panels to really be captured well. So bass trap panels are very effective, but because of the depth of them, I don't necessarily think that they are the first thing you should be thinking about in your home studio. I think broadband panels, especially for recording, are the first thing you should consider for your home studio. But if you can afford bass trap panels, and you're only going to get a couple panels, you might as well get bass trap panels because they absorb more of the frequency spectrum, and that's always an advantage. It's never a disadvantage, except if it's getting too into your budget or too into the space in your room. Okay, that said, there are a couple places that you can put bass trap panels to be more effective than others. The first is corners. And that's because corners absorb more low-end energy, or they build up more low-end energy because bass frequencies travel along walls. So the energy of a lot of low-end is best captured in the corners where two walls intersect, or the wall and the ceiling intersect. So bass traps placed in corners, bass trap panels placed in corners will typically be more effective. And it also is because in a corner, you inherently, if you put a rectangular shape spanning across a corner, have air behind that bass trap, and that also makes that acoustic panel more effective at capturing the low end. So corners are very effective for bass trapping, which actually leads me perfectly to number 5, which are what are called corner traps. Corner traps, you've probably seen them. They're kind of, if you're looking at them from top down, they're triangular shaped because they're trying to span the corner. So you just push them into the corner, and they're often made of foam, but they can be made of insulation. They can be made of different materials. You also could just build out your entire corner with insulation to trap all the low end frequencies in that corner. So typically speaking, though, corner traps are what you're going to see from acoustic manufacturers. They're pre-made to be just pushed into a corner and treat that entire corner. And they're very effective. They're good. The downside of them tends to be that you need traditional corners for them to work. Not all home studios. In fact, one corner maybe out of my 4 corners in this room, not counting my ceilings, would be a good use for corner traps, or even able to have a corner trap pushed into it, because I have a breaker box in one, I have light switches in another. Like, I can't just block off those corners completely. But if you can block off your corners completely, corner traps can be a fairly cost-effective way to do decent level low-end management. But another place that I think is maybe even better and talked about less is your cloud. So a cloud is not a specific type of acoustic treatment as much as it is the placement. So corner traps are corner traps designed to live in the corners, but a cloud is typically just a broadband or bass trap panel that is hung above either your mix position or your recording position. And the great thing about clouds is you can typically lose a little bit more ceiling space than you can floor space in your room without it negatively impacting the feel and the flow of your room. In fact, clouds can make it feel very cool in your room. Think of it as being cloudy. That's a bad joke. That said, clouds are great because you could have a 6-inch panel, so a nice deep bass trap panel, and you could hang it a few inches down from the ceiling, ideally 6 inches, but a few inches down from the ceiling, and you could really capture a lot of the low end from your speakers or from whatever it is you're recording without eating up space in the room. So you could have broadband panels on your walls, or broadband panels that you move around inside your room, and then only have a bass trap cloud, and that could be very effective. So number 6 is clouds. They are extremely important. And another reason that they're important isn't just for bass trapping, but also because depending on what you're doing, the ceiling might actually be the closest hard reflective surface to you. So if you're standing up to sing, if you're singing in the middle of the room, the walls are probably further from your microphone than the ceiling is. So you're going to get more reflection off of that ceiling than you are from the walls that are further away. So ceiling and clouds are something that I think are not talked about enough and are a really important part of cleaning up your recordings. So I would say broadband panels and clouds are where most home studios should start, and we'll kind of do an overview of this a little bit more as we get into it. Okay, number 7 is another way to control low end that's a little bit more unique. This is a true type of treatment. It's what's called a tube trap. Now, this is a tube. Typically, they're about a foot in diameter and about 6 feet tall, and they're made of hard fiberglass insulation. You can literally just buy pipe insulation, 2-inch pipe insulation that's designed to fit around an 8-inch pipe, and just glue 2 segments of that together because they usually come in 3-foot segments. And you've created a tube trap. Wrap it in some fabric so the fiberglass doesn't just leak out all over the room. And you've created a tube trap. And so they're very DIY friendly, and they're a little bit hot topic issue with acousticians because some people would argue that you'd be better doing a different type of acoustic treatment, but people really love them. They are effective. I don't think you can argue that they aren't effective. It's really just a question of could something potentially be more effective, but there's a lot of advantage to tube traps. For example, they're 1 foot in diameter, so they can just sit on the ground and you can put them wherever you want in your studio. So you could circle them around you when you build, 4 or 6 of them, circle them around you when you're singing, and then you could put them out into the corners for, low-end management when you're mixing. If you're recording drums, you could have them right up around the drum set to get a tighter recording, or you could put them further out to just contain some of the bass in the room. Tube traps can be very functional because they're extremely versatile, which is actually perfectly leading me to number 8, which is gobos. Technically, a tube trap is a type of gobo, meaning that it is movable. A gobo, I think in the original definition, is what was called a go-between. So it'd be something that you place between 2 performers if they're both recording at the same time to try to reduce the amount of bleed between 2 performers, if you will. But gobos functionally are just acoustic treatment that can move around the room to be more versatile. So any of these could be a gobo. You could have your panels be a gobo. They make acoustic foam even that's gobos. And I would say some of the best acoustic foam, some of the only acoustic foam that I'd recommend are the gobo versions because they're typically, to be sturdy enough, actually deep enough. So some of the gobo editions of acoustic foam are actually 2 inches deep. That said, you could have a gobo of any of these, which is why this types was in quotations. But they're a great type of acoustic treatment for a home studio because they give you the most bang for your buck. You could just have 2 or 4 pieces of acoustic treatment, 2 or 4 broadband panels, for example, that you can move around in your space depending on what it is you're doing. If you're recording acoustic, you bring them over here and help you get a tighter acoustic guitar recording. You're recording vocals, you have them right next to you when you're recording vocals. And they're usually a little easier to move around than, let's say, just stringing up a comforter around you that takes a lot more work and doesn't look as good and probably isn't quite as effective. So it gives you a little bit of the best of all the worlds in that they give you the flexibility and they give you the most bang for your buck because you can move them around in different ways. Now, a couple ones to know about, or ones that I'd recommend here, are from Music City Acoustics. They make great broadband panels, great any size panels that you'd want, mid-high panels, bass trap panels, and they make some different ways that you can adapt their panels and their accessories to functionally just be gobos. They can either have little gobo feet if you're okay with little short panels, or you could put them on little stands that they make where you could just have these stands that move around with you. So that's the first type, is where you would basically just take one of the panels and turn it into a gobo. But they also make gobos, which are traditionally these larger acoustic panels, 3x6, 3 foot by 6 foot, something like that, and usually 6 inches deep or so. And they do some really cool ones that are on wheels, so you can just roll them around wherever you want. I'm putting 2 of them in this space so that I could roll them up to the drum kit to get a tighter recording, and I can push them back into the corners to operate kind of as my bass traps in my corners, where I have a door on one side and a tube that goes through the wall, a pipe that goes through the wall on the other side, so I can't do just traditional corner traps in those corners. I can use these gobos to be multifunction. They can be for my acoustic treatment up tight on the drums or my corner trapping of my bass frequency. So point being, gobos are super cool. The ones from Music City Acoustics are really cool. And another reason they're really cool has to do with number 9, which is diffusion. So diffusion, as I mentioned at the top, is where you're spreading frequencies out. And we can't have true diffusion in a home studio just because of the dimensions for the most part in most home studios. But we can spread frequencies out in a way that's both pleasing to our ears and could be pleasing and lively to the recording. So if you're doing double duty, if you're recording and mixing in your home studio, or you're just recording in your home studio, first focus on absorption, making sure that you're actually capturing enough of those frequencies, reducing the amount of energy just flying around in the room as much as you can. After that, consider, if you want, maybe adding a little bit of excitement through diffusion. And so one way that I'm going to do this is with those gobos that I just mentioned. The front side of them is absorptive, but then you flip it around on the back side, they use this pegboard design that is scattering some of those high frequencies around so I can create a livelier space if I have that side pointed towards the drum set, or if I want a deader space, I can turn it around so the absorption is pointed towards the drum set. Another thing I'm doing is they make these really cool space coupling diffusers that are like a bunch of little squares in a huge square, and I'm going to stack them up from the ground with a couple little gobo feet, and I'll move them around in the room to have sound travel through them. It will get spread out all through the room, and then the mics further away from the drum kit will hear more equally dispersed reflections, so it's not going to have as much phase cancellation, but it will have a really heightened, lively sound to it. They'll be great for big, bombastic drum sounds. So gobos and diffusers together in particular, I think for me in my home studio is something I'm very excited about. I'm going to have some diffusion on like my back wall. I might have it a couple other places, but for the most part, I'm focusing more on absorption in my built-in acoustics, in my installed acoustics, if you will. And then I'm going to do a little bit of scattering strategically here or there with a little bit of diffusion to just add a little bit of excitement back in. Now, I have number 10, and I actually have a little bonus one that you might want to consider in a home studio, but number 10 is construction. This one is not for everybody, but I think is a great potential option for a home studio. And this is where if you own your space, or at least you're going to be in your space for several years, you could literally just build walls of acoustic treatment. And this can be much more affordable and look much sleeker, look much cooler, because as opposed to just hanging walls or panels on a wall where that is now what's on that wall, you could still do whatever you want with this wall, but the whole thing is an acoustic panel. So this wall behind me, the whole thing, I've got all the supplies right on the other side of the camera. The whole thing is going to be a 5.5-inch deep acoustic panel, basically floor to ceiling, and it's going to capture a bunch of low end, mid range, up all the high frequencies. I'm going to have a little bit of diffusion on it, and I'm functionally just building a wall, putting insulation in it, covering it with fabric, and then I'm doing a bit of a design on it, but that part's optional. I'm going to have a video going through that entire process here, and then I'm also going to do, if you don't want to do the full construction route, there's a great product called Fabric Wall that has this track system where literally you attach these tracks to the wall, you put insulation against the wall, and then you put fabric in front of it and you push it into the track system so it looks super clean, and it's really easy. No staples. It could be extremely easy, and you could do 2-inch panels like that mid-high panels extremely easily with these. Or in my case, I'm going to build out a very small structure with wood to make them 3.5 inches deep, but it will be way easier than this wall I'm building behind me. So you can do construction if you're handy at all. If you're DIY-ish at all, doing this construction could be a great, fairly less expensive way to do it. You can also DIY panels, and that's great if you're moving between places, but also just know yourself. If you're not someone who likes doing DIY stuff, doing a lot of building and construction is just time you're taking away. So you're either spending your time or you're spending your money, and for some people, it's worth the investment of the money. We can't just avoid acoustics. So for some people, it's worth investing some money so that they don't have to spend all the time doing it. I was originally going to build maybe 3 or 4 times as much acoustic treatment for this space than I am now, because I realized if I were to build all of that, that would have taken me several weeks, if not months longer to finish what I would like to have finished in this room. So I'm going to build as much as I can. I'm going to do some DIY construction, some acoustic construction, which is number 10, and get it treated as much as I can. And then I'm going to bring in some products from Music City Acoustics, the Gobos, Clouds, which are just going to be bass trap panels, the diffusers that will help me kind of spread the sound around. And it's going to be kind of the best of both worlds, where I'm saving money on what I can, but then I'm investing money where it makes sense. So consider that for yourself. Do you want to spend the time or do you want to spend the money? Construction is a great option, but only if you like doing that stuff. And you can also build the panels. I think there's a very technical set of skills. It's a little more precision oriented than a wall in my mind, at least. Hopefully that's the way I'll feel about it at the end of building this wall. But I think either can be great. Now, there's one more I want to discuss, but quickly, let's just recap the 10. We have acoustic foam. I don't recommend it. We have mid-high panels. This is the thinnest acoustic panels that make sense in a home studio, 2 inches thick. We have broadband panels. This is my main recommendation for most home studio people. These are at least 4 inches thick. And then we have bass trap panels. That's number 4. These are at least 5.5, 6, 7, 8 inches thick. Corner traps specifically designed to fit into your corners. Great if you have traditional corners. Obviously not great if you don't have traditional corners. We have clouds. Not as much a specific treatment, but a location. And they're actually the second thing I'd recommend for home studios is your clouds, because the ceiling is one of the first places that your sound is going to reach and bounce back into your microphone or into your ears if you're mixing. And it's going to drastically change the sound of what you're capturing. So treating those clouds, treating your ceiling can provide a much cleaner recording or a much cleaner mixing experience for you. So don't sleep on clouds. So broadband panels and clouds are my top two. And I think for your clouds, you either want to do broadband panels or bass trap panels for your clouds. Number 7 is tube traps. These are great, easy DIY options for functionally gobos that can be great for low end, and you can put them in corners, or you can use them as gobos to put around people. Number 8 is gobos, and this is another one that I definitely recommend, whether it's tube traps, whether it's getting panels in some of the legs like Music City Acoustics makes, or getting true gobos that are designed to be gobos rolling on big old wheels and stuff like that. Number 8 is gobos. I'd recommend those for home studio. So broadband panels, clouds, gobos. And then number 9 is diffusers. Only if you have treated enough of the main issues in your studio would I even consider starting to think about diffusers. Starting out, don't worry about them too much. And if you are getting them, think about them very strategically and think about how you could use them to help shape the sound of what it is you're recording. And then number 10 is construction. And construction could be addressing all these other issues. They could be having diffusion, they could be bass trap depth, they could also be mid-high depth or broadband depth. And you could be building a cloud on the ceiling. In terms of construction, you could be building an entire wall behind me like I am. Well, you can't be building it behind me. I hope not. At least I'm going to build it behind me. Or actually, if you want to come build it for me, that's great too. Okay, so that's number 10. And then 11, a little bonus one for you, is free. This is just your environment. This is just thinking about the things in your space and using them to the best of your ability. And I think this can be very helpful, not as much for mixing, but for getting cleaner recordings. If you don't have any acoustic treatment, you don't have the budget to invest in acoustic treatment, first of all, don't buy a $1,000 microphone before you buy a few $100s in acoustic treatment. Like, have your priorities ranked ordered with acoustic treatment before huge gear upgrades. But if you don't have the budget to add any acoustic treatment, then I highly recommend just grabbing your comforter and tacking it to the wall, or getting packing blankets and hanging them from the wall. Fold them over a few times so they're a little bit thicker. You don't want super thin. If it's only a 1/4 inch thick, that's hardly going to do anything. But if you have a packing blanket that's folded over until it's 2 inches thick, that could be very effective. Same thing goes with a comforter. Same thing goes, I was thinking the other day, I was sitting on our couch, and our pillow backs on our couch, we could take them off, and they're functionally like 1 foot by 2 foot acoustic panels. They're super dense foam. They're actually 4 inches deep probably. So you potentially could just use the things that you have in your house, put them up on chairs to get them up at the height that you're recording. You don't want to have them just sitting on the ground for recording purposes, although some stuff in the space is going to be better than nothing. But when you're trying to reduce reflections for your recordings, you want to get them kind of up to the height of the microphone, the things that you're recording. And you're just trying to capture the things in the space before they bounce back into the microphone. And another one that people don't think about is their bodies. Your body is just a big semi-absorptive thing that could capture some reflections before they got back in the microphone, or at least stop them from just bouncing off that wall and getting straight back into the microphone. So if I had this microphone a little bit higher, it would be hearing more of what's going on in this wall behind me. But if I get it just a little bit lower where my face even is just in front of it, or if I had it even lower where my chest was in front of it, that's going to be even a little bit more effective. So you can think about your body in the space relative to how you could capture reflections and reduce the reflections into the microphone. So your placement of your body relative to your microphone or to your instrument or whatever can actually be very effective. And another way people use this is like with drums, they'll put a room microphone behind the drummer as opposed to in front of the drum kit, because the drummer's body is absorbing a lot of the high end from the cymbals and giving you a more pleasing sound for your drum room than when it's in front of the drums. Both can work. I'll probably do room mics in front of my drums in this scenario, but it's just another thing to consider that's super practical. You don't have to get an acoustic panel to get that same kind of absorption of frequencies before it hits a microphone. Point being, think about your environment. So real quick overview again, foam, don't do it. Mid-high panels, 2 inches thick, that's a great starting point, but if you can, broadband panels, 4 inches thick, number 3 is better. And if you can afford the space and the budget, bass trap panels is even better, usually around 6 inches. Corner traps, if you have traditional corners, can be very effective, but bass trap panels could be even more effective. It just depends on the corner traps you're getting. Clouds, a cloud above your mix position, your recording position, suspended from the ceiling, very effective and a great place to put a bass trap panel to capture some of that low-end energy. Tube traps are a great DIY option because they're fairly easy to build. They're not the cheapest thing in the world, but they're very easy to build. I'm going to put a few in here just to experience what it's like building tube traps. And they're pretty effective at low end, and you could move them around because they're functionally also number 8, which is a gobo, which is very effective for a home studio because it gives you that versatility, that best bang for your buck for whatever it is that you buy and put in your studio or build and put in your studio. And then diffusers, spreading the sound around to keep a little bit of energy, not something you should start with in a home studio, but something you could add in at some point, or it could be part of your grand picture if you're thinking about this holistically. Construction, building walls. This could be building with studs or building with a simple track system like fabric wall, and just putting insulation and tucking it back with fabric. That's a huge acoustic panel. So construction can be awesome. And then finally, your environment, just using the things around you. This number 11, a little bonus one, just using things around you to capture some of those reflections. This can be very effective for recording. I probably wouldn't recommend it for getting great mixes, but taking advantage of the placement of you in the space, your microphones in the space, and then the things you have in the space that can capture some of those frequencies that you don't want bouncing around and building up in your recordings. Okay. I hope this is helpful. I know it's a lot, but hopefully I made it fairly clear. And to really highlight, the main ones I'd recommend for most people are broadband panels, clouds, gobos, and taking advantage of their environment. Those are the 4 that I'd really focus on. Pretty much everything else you could either ignore or at least not start with for your setup. Okay, I hope this is helpful. If it was, be sure to let me know in a comment. If you're enjoying this podcast so far, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I know this is a different format, but these things take a while to talk through. And just doing really short videos, I felt like I was having to cut myself off from the information that you really needed to have. So I know it's a little bit more informal. I know a bunch of pictures are really nice and all that stuff, but I like this podcast format because it gives me the time to really explain and really talk through these things with you that I think these topics deserve and you deserve to hear. So I know it's a little bit different, but I hope you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying doing it. I think it's a fun format and a challenge for me to articulate these the best that I can so that it works in both a video and audio version. Okay, if you don't already have it, be sure to grab the Home Studio Pro checklist from thebandguide.com/Home Studio Pro checklist, all one word. If this was helpful, be sure to leave a comment down below or a review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll see you in another episode real soon.
One thing at a time, I can only